What are the elements of construction cost estimation? So what information do estimators use to create an estimate? The following are key terms and concepts, but be aware that there's a large degree of overlap between some of them. Quantity takeoff, developed during the pre-construction phase. A quantity takeoff measures the materials and labor needed to complete a project. Labor hour. The labor hour, or man-hour, is a unit of work that measures the output of one person working for 1 hour. Labor rate. The labor rate is the amount per hour one pays to skilled craftsmen. This includes not just the basic hourly rate and benefits, but the added costs of overtime and payroll burdens, such as worker compensation and unemployment insurance. This template will help you keep track of wages and labor hours. Material prices. Since the cost of materials is prone to fluctuation based on market conditions and such factors as seasonal variations, cost estimators may look at historical cost data and the various phases of the buying cycle when calculating expected material prices. Equipment costs. Equipment costs refer primarily to the cost of running, and possibly renting, heavy machinery, such as cement mixers and cranes. It's important to note that the equipment in use influences how quickly you can complete the project, so the use of equipment actually impacts many costs outside of those directly associated with running the equipment. Subcontractor quotes. Most contractors will hire multiple specialist subcontractors to complete parts of the construction. You add these subcontractors' quotes to the contractor's total estimate. It can be helpful to use a tracker to collect all the subcontractor documentation in one place. Indirect costs. Indirect costs are expenses not directly associated with construction work, like administrative costs, transport costs, smaller types of equipment, temporary structures, design fees, legal fees, permits, and any number of other costs, depending on the particular project. Profits. Of course, in order to make a profit, the contractor adds a margin onto the cost of completing the work. Subcontractors do the same when preparing their own quotes. Contingencies. Since even the most accurate estimate is likely to be affected by unforeseeable factors, such as materials wastage, an estimate will usually have a predetermined sum of money built into account for such added costs. Escalation. Escalation refers to the natural inflation of costs over time, and it's especially vital to take into account for long-running projects. Some projects have escalation clauses that address how to handle this inflation. Bonds. An owner will usually require a contractor to arrange for the issuance of a performance bond in favor of the project owner. The bond functions as a kind of guarantee of delivery. Should the contractor fail to complete the project according to the terms of the contract, the owner is entitled to compensation for monetary losses up to the amount covered by the performance bond. Capital costs. Capital costs are simply the costs associated with establishing a facility. These include the following: the cost of acquiring land, the cost of conducting feasibility studies and the pre-design phase, paying the architect, engineer, and specialist members of the design team, the total cost of construction, which covers not just materials, equipment, and labor, but also administrative, permitting, and supervision costs, as well as any insurance fees or taxes, the cost of any temporary equipment or structures that are not part of the final construction, the cost of hiring a commissioner, and the cost of inspecting the structure when it's near completion. Operations and maintenance costs. More a concern for the owner than the contractor. One accounts for operations and maintenance costs during the design phase. Making choices that lower the total lifetime cost of a building may result in higher construction costs. Operating costs include land rent, the salaries of permanent operations staff, maintenance costs, renovation expenses, as needed, utilities, and insurance. Variances. Owners will often allocate construction budgets that are larger than cost estimates because even good, thorough cost estimates have a tendency to underestimate actual construction costs. This can happen for a number of reasons. For example, wage increases, which can be difficult to forecast, will make construction costs rise. Seasonal or natural events, such as heavy rainfall, may call for action to protect construction or restore the construction site. Large projects in urban areas may face regulatory or legal issues, such as a demand for additional permitting. And lastly, owners who begin construction without finalizing the project's design will over-budget to account for design changes and the inevitable cost increases that result from throwing a project off schedule.